6 months passed after Ambassador Tiresh returned to the Viridian Empire. During those months, humanity held its breath and waited. The diplomatic channels remained open and conversations continued, but nothing was certain. The High Council was debating humanity's proposals. Some members wanted to accept the new reality and pursue peace. Others wanted to find ways to overcome the gravity problem and continue the Empire's expansion. Commander Zethrak recovered from his injuries during this time. The medical team had repaired the structural damage to his crystalline body. Physically, he was as good as new. Mentally, the experience had changed him. He found himself thinking differently about strength and weakness, about conquest and cooperation. Earth had taught him humility in ways that no battle ever had. He spent his recovery time studying human history. The Viridians had collected extensive data about humanity before attempting first contact. Now Zethrak read that data with new understanding. He learned about human wars, about their conflicts and struggles. He read about how they fought each other for thousands of years but eventually learned to work together. How they built international organizations to solve problems peacefully. How they turned competition into cooperation. What struck Zethrak most was how humans dealt with their own diversity. Hundreds of different languages, thousands of cultures, countless belief systems. They argued constantly and disagreed about everything. Yet somehow they maintained a unified planetary government. They had learned that diversity could be strength rather than weakness. The Viridian Empire had diversity too, 47 different species living under imperial rule. But it was not like human diversity. The conquered species had no real voice in imperial decisions. They followed orders or faced consequences. Some species had tried to rebel over the years. The Empire always crushed those rebellions with military force. It worked, but Zethrak was beginning to wonder if it was sustainable in the long term. He wrote a second report to the High Council. This one was not about military capabilities or tactical assessments. It was about philosophy and long-term strategy. He argued that the Empire's model of conquest was outdated. In a galaxy where species like humans existed, species that could not be easily conquered, the Empire needed a new approach. He proposed transforming the Empire into something closer to the human model. A federation of independent worlds that chose to cooperate. Species would have real representation in government. They would contribute voluntarily rather than being forced. It would be slower and more complicated than simple conquest, but it would be more stable and sustainable. His report was controversial. Many in the military leadership thought he had been too influenced by human ideas. Some called him a traitor to Viridian interests, but others, particularly older and wiser voices on the High Council, found his arguments compelling. The Empire was facing a turning point, and Zethrak was helping them see new possibilities. On Earth, life gradually returned to normal after the alien visit. The news media had covered the story extensively. Everyone knew about the Viridian Empire and the threat they had posed. Everyone knew that Earth's gravity had saved them from conquest. It became a source of pride. Humans joked about being the heavy worlders that aliens could not handle. But some humans took the encounter more seriously. Scientists studied the implications of meeting a low-gravity species. Engineers designed new spacecraft and equipment optimized for high-gravity worlds. Military planners developed strategies for defending against future alien threats. Everyone understood that humanity's isolation was over. They were part of a larger galactic community now, whether they wanted to be or not. Lieutenant Greg Morris, the young officer who had first suggested using gravity as a weapon, received a promotion and a medal. His quick thinking had potentially saved billions of lives. He became something of a celebrity, giving interviews about the experience. But Greg remained humble about it. He said he had just been desperate and lucky. Any officer in his position might have had the same idea. Captain Linda Hayes also received recognition for her handling of the Viridian delegation. She had walked a careful line between showing strength and avoiding unnecessary provocation. Her demonstration with the push-ups had become famous. Videos of it circulated around the world, showing the moment when the Viridians realized they were outmatched by human physical capabilities. Linda did not particularly enjoy the attention. She was a soldier, not a performer, but she understood that her actions had helped prevent a war, so she accepted the recognition gracefully. She gave speeches at military academies about the importance of understanding your advantages and using them wisely. Not just physical advantages, but psychological ones too. Finally, 8 months after Commander Zethrak's visit to Earth, the High Council made its decision. Ambassador Tiresh returned to Earth with official documents and proposals. This time she came to stay for a while. The negotiations would be complex and would take months or even years to finalize, but the basic framework was agreed upon. The Viridian Empire formally recognized human independence and sovereignty. They would never threaten Earth or human colonies. In return, humanity agreed not to interfere with imperial internal affairs directly. They would not invade Viridian territory or encourage rebellions. But the Empire also committed to a gradual democratization process. Starting with the 5 most recently conquered worlds, they would hold referendums about independence. Species could choose to remain part of the Empire, become independent, or form some hybrid relationship. The process would be supervised by neutral observers, including humans. It would expand to more worlds over the next 20 years. The technology exchange began immediately. Viridian scientists came to Earth to study high-gravity engineering. They wore advanced exoskeletons and could function reasonably well on the surface for short periods. They were amazed by human construction techniques, by how buildings were designed to withstand enormous weight and stress. They learned about materials science and structural engineering in ways that would help them explore other high-gravity worlds. In exchange, human scientists gained access to Viridian knowledge about faster-than-light travel. The Empire's ships used a technology called fold space that was far more efficient than human fusion drives. Learning this technology would allow humanity to explore distant star systems. It would take years to fully understand and implement, but it opened up incredible possibilities. The most interesting exchange, however, was cultural. Viridian artists and historians came to Earth to experience human culture firsthand. They attended concerts where they felt music vibrating through the ground with intensity, impossible in low gravity. They visited museums and saw how humans preserved their history. They watched sports where humans competed in feats of strength and endurance. Human artists and scholars visited Viridian worlds too, though they had to be careful. Moving in low gravity was disorienting at first. Humans felt incredibly strong and light. They had to learn to control their movements to avoid accidentally breaking things or hurting themselves. But once they adapted, they found Viridian culture beautiful and complex. Commander Zethrak, now promoted to Cultural Liaison Officer, often guided human visitors around the imperial capital. He enjoyed seeing his world through human eyes. Things he had always taken for granted seemed new and interesting when humans asked questions about them. The delicate crystal architecture that would shatter under Earth's gravity, the floating gardens that drifted in low-gravity air currents, the unique art forms that only made sense in a 3-dimensional low-gravity environment. One day he was guiding Dr. Amy Foster, the scientist who had questioned him during that first terrible meeting on Earth. She had come to study Viridian biology and was fascinated by crystalline life forms. They stood in an observation deck looking out at the planet below. Amy said she wanted to apologize. She said her questions during the negotiations had been deliberately harsh. She had been trying to make the Viridians uncomfortable, to force them to admit their weakness. She felt bad about causing pain even though it had been necessary for Earth's defense. Zethrak appreciated the apology but said it was not needed. He said that meeting had been the most important experience of his life. It had taught him that being strong did not mean conquering others. Real strength was understanding your limitations and working with others despite differences. Earth's gravity had broken his body but opened his mind. They talked for hours discussing biology and philosophy, comparing their species and cultures. Amy admitted that before meeting the Viridians, she had assumed all aliens would be basically similar to humans. Maybe look different but think in similar ways. The Viridians had shown her how wrong that assumption was. Crystalline beings who thought in terms of light and structure, who experienced reality in ways humans could barely understand. Zethrak said he had made similar assumptions about humans. He thought they would be like other species the Empire had met. Weak, divided, easily intimidated. Instead, they were strong in unexpected ways, united despite their diversity, confident without being aggressive. They had defeated the Empire without firing a shot, just by being themselves. As the conversation ended and Amy prepared to leave, Zethrak reflected. The Viridian shuttle lifted off from Edwards Air Force Base the next morning. Commander Zethrak sat in his command chair and watched Earth shrink below them. The beautiful blue planet that had broken his warriors and shattered his assumptions about human primitiveness. As they climbed higher and the artificial gravity system took over, he felt his body healing again. But some damage went deeper than physical cracks in crystal structures. Mirlin sat at the navigation console. She was quiet, focused on getting them back to the fleet safely. 3 warriors had not survived the visit to Earth. Their bodies had sustained too much damage and they had simply shattered during the return journey. Morinth was still in critical condition. The medical pod was keeping her alive, but barely. She would need extensive treatment back on the fleet's medical ship. Zethrak began composing his report to the High Council. He had to be honest but also diplomatic. The Council would not want to hear that the Empire had finally met a species they could not conquer. They would not want to admit that low-gravity physiology was a fatal weakness. But Zethrak had to make them understand. Lives depended on it. The entire Empire's future might depend on it. He started with facts. Earth's gravity measured 9.8 meters per second squared. This was approximately 3 times the gravity of the Viridian homeworld. Viridian warriors experienced rapid structural failure when exposed to this gravity for extended periods. Combat operations would be impossible. Even basic movement was extremely difficult. Then he added observations about human capabilities. Humans evolved in high gravity and were adapted for it. Their physical strength was extraordinary compared to other species. Their endurance was remarkable. In lower gravity environments like Viridian worlds, humans would possess abilities that seemed almost supernatural. They would be able to jump higher, run faster, lift heavier objects, and fight longer than any Viridian warrior. He included the tactical analysis. The Empire's standard invasion strategy would fail completely on Earth. Orbital bombardment would work, but would violate the Empire's own laws about preserving conquered populations. Ground invasion was impossible. Blockade was pointless since Earth was largely self-sufficient. There was no military path to victory. Finally, he made his recommendation. Open diplomatic channels with humanity. Negotiate a mutual non-aggression treaty. Explore opportunities for peaceful technology exchange. Most importantly, do not threaten or provoke them. Because if humanity decided to become hostile, they could export their resistance strategies to other conquered species. The entire Empire could face coordinated rebellions. Zethrak finished the report and sent it through the faster-than-light communication system. It would reach the High Council within hours. Then he would face judgment for his failure, or possibly praise for preventing a catastrophic war. He was not sure which outcome was more likely. On Earth, Captain Linda Hayes wrote her own report. She sat in her office at Edwards Air Force Base with a cup of coffee and organized her thoughts. The alien visit had gone exactly as planned. Maybe too perfectly. The Viridians had been completely unprepared for Earth's gravity. They had suffered badly and 3 of them had died. Linda felt some guilt about that, even though it was not really humanity's fault that the aliens could not survive here. She described the Viridian delegation's physical deterioration, the structural cracks, the difficulty moving, the obvious pain they had experienced. She noted that this was purely defensive intelligence. Earth had not attacked the aliens. The planet itself had done all the work. She also wrote about Commander Zethrak's character. He had seemed like an honorable leader, not a warmonger or a fanatic, just a military officer following orders. When confronted with the truth about Earth's impregnability, he had accepted it with dignity. He had not threatened or blustered. He had not promised revenge. He had simply acknowledged reality and agreed to recommend peace. Linda thought there was a real chance this would work. The Viridian Empire would realize that Earth was not worth fighting over. They would leave humanity alone and focus on their existing territories. Everyone would benefit. No war, no deaths, just a mutual understanding that some species were best left as neighbors rather than enemies. She finished her report and sent it up the chain of command. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked out her window at the desert. The same desert where alien warriors had struggled to walk just 2 days ago. It seemed impossible that such a simple thing as gravity could prevent a war. But sometimes the universe worked in unexpected ways. 3 weeks later, a new Viridian ship arrived at Earth. This one did not come with weapons charged or threatening messages. It came slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions and a request to speak with human authorities. The ship carried Ambassador Tiresh, a senior diplomat from the Viridian High Council. Tiresh was older than Zethrak and more experienced. She had negotiated treaties with dozens of species. She understood politics and compromise in ways that military commanders rarely did. When she reviewed Zethrak's report, she had immediately understood what needed to happen. The Empire had to adapt or face eventual collapse. She wore an advanced exoskeleton designed by Viridian engineers specifically for high-gravity environments. The suit supported her crystalline structure and distributed weight evenly. It was powered by a small fusion reactor and could function for up to 6 hours before needing recharge. It was uncomfortable and restrictive, but it allowed her to survive on Earth's surface. Ambassador Peter Quinn met her at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Peter was a career diplomat in his 50s with gray hair and a reputation for patience and wisdom. He had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, reading everything known about Viridian culture and psychology, planning what to offer and what to hold back. They met in a conference room with a beautiful view of the city skyline. Tyresh moved slowly in her exoskeleton, but with more stability than Zethrak had managed. She sat carefully in a reinforced chair designed to support her weight plus the suit. Peter sat across from her with a warm professional smile. Tyresh thanked Peter for meeting with her. She said the High Council had received Commander Zethrak's report and taken it seriously. They understood now that Earth could not be conquered through military force. They accepted that humanity deserved to be treated as equals, not as primitives to be subjugated. Peter said humanity appreciated the Empire's wisdom. He said Earth had no desire for conflict. Humans wanted to explore space, learn from other species, and contribute to the galactic community. They just refused to be conquered or controlled. Tyresh asked what humanity wanted from the Empire. What terms would Earth accept for peaceful relations? Peter leaned forward. He said first, formal recognition of human sovereignty. The Empire would acknowledge Earth and all human colonies as independent territory, never to be threatened or invaded. Second, a technology exchange program. The Empire had knowledge humans could benefit from, and humans had insights about high-gravity engineering that might help the Empire. Third, and most important, a roadmap to freedom for the Empire's conquered species. Tyresh had expected the third demand. She said the High Council would not simply release all 47 conquered systems. That would destabilize the region and potentially cause chaos. Many of those species had been integrated into Imperial society for generations. Peter said he understood. He was not asking for immediate independence for everyone, but he wanted a commitment to gradual transition. Starting with the most recently conquered worlds, give species a choice. Let them vote on independence or continued association with the Empire. Provide support during the transition. Help them build stable governments and economies. Do it slowly over decades if necessary, but do it. He explained why this mattered. If the Empire continued to hold worlds by force, those worlds would eventually rebel. They would learn from Earth's example. They would develop their own resistance strategies. The Empire would spend all its energy fighting internal conflicts instead of exploring and growing. But if the Empire voluntarily transformed from a conquering force into a federation of allied worlds, it could become stronger and more stable. Tyresh sat quietly, thinking about his words. Her exoskeleton made a soft humming sound as it adjusted to her shifting weight. Finally, she said Peter's proposal had merit. She could not promise the High Council would accept it all, but she would present it fairly. She thought there was room for compromise and negotiation. Peter smiled. He said that was all humanity asked for, a chance to talk, to find solutions that benefited everyone. He stood and offered his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Tyresh carefully stood and extended her own crystalline hand. The exoskeleton gave her enough stability to complete the gesture without falling. They shook hands, human and Viridian, representative of two species who had nearly gone to war. Outside the window, the city continued its daily life. Millions of humans going about their business, unaware that their planet's terrible gravity had just changed the course of galactic history. Admiral Helen Brooks sat deep underground in the Strategic Command Center beneath the Pentagon. The room was filled with screens showing data from around the world. Military officers moved between workstations, monitoring the situation at Edwards Air Force Base. Helen watched the live video feed from the base. She could see the Viridian shuttle sitting on the landing pad with lights glowing through its windows. Helen was 54 years old and had spent her entire adult life in the military. She had gray hair that she kept short and practical. Her uniform was covered with medals from various conflicts. She had a reputation for being brilliant at strategy, and she never made emotional decisions. Today she watched the aliens struggle and felt satisfied but not happy. This was not a victory to celebrate. It was just survival. General Kyle Sanders stood beside her. He was a huge man, tall and broad with a voice that could fill a room. He asked if they should let the aliens leave now. They had made their point. The Viridians understood they could not conquer Earth. Maybe it was time to end this before someone got desperate. Helen shook her head. She said they needed one more demonstration. Tomorrow morning they would show the Viridians exactly what human soldiers could do in Earth's gravity. The aliens needed to understand not just that they were weak here, but that humans would be unstoppable on Viridian worlds. It was important psychology, make them afraid not just of losing, but of what would happen if they started a war. Kyle was not sure. He said pushing too hard could be dangerous. If the Viridians felt cornered, they might attack from orbit. They might decide that if they could not have Earth, nobody could. Their ships could bombard the planet from space. Earth had no orbital defenses that could stop them. Helen understood his concern. She had thought about it carefully, but she believed the Viridians were scientists and explorers at heart. They conquered because it was easy, not because they enjoyed violence. Once they understood the true cost of fighting humanity, they would choose peace. It was a calculated risk, but she thought it was the right one. She pulled up a star map showing Viridian territory. 47 conquered systems spread across a section of the galaxy. Every single one was a low-gravity world. The Viridians had built their entire empire around planets they could survive on. They had never needed to adapt or overcome environmental challenges. That was their weakness. Kyle asked what would happen after the Viridians left. Should humanity prepare for more attacks? Should they build weapons to strike back at the Empire? Helen said no. Humanity did not have the resources for an offensive war in space. The Viridian ships were faster and better armed. In open space combat, humans would lose badly. Their only advantage was defensive. Earth was a fortress that defended itself through gravity. They needed to make the Viridians understand that, and convince them that peace was better than war. The next morning, Commander Zethrak forced himself to leave the shuttle. His body had healed somewhat during the night. The cracks had sealed and his structure was more stable. But he knew returning to Earth's surface would start the damage all over again. Every moment in that terrible gravity was hurting him. Only 12 warriors could leave the shuttle. The rest were too damaged. Morinth was still in medical stasis. 2 others were close to dying. Their crystalline bodies were breaking down faster than they could heal. Zethrak had already accepted that they might not survive long enough to get back to the fleet. The shuttle door opened and the crushing weight of Earth's gravity hit him immediately. Zethrak stepped out onto the landing pad and his legs shook. The walk yesterday had been 200 meters. Today the humans wanted them to walk to a different location. Something about a demonstration. Zethrak was not looking forward to it. Linda Hayes was waiting with the same calm smile from yesterday. She greeted the Viridians politely and said she had something interesting to show them. Before they talked more about negotiations, she wanted them to see a normal training exercise for human soldiers. Zethrak felt dread growing inside him. A training exercise. That could only mean one thing. The humans were going to demonstrate their physical capabilities. They were going to show off what they could do in this crushing gravity, while the Viridians watched and suffered. They walked across the base to an open field. The field had obstacles set up. Walls to climb, barriers to crawl under, ropes to swing from. It looked like some kind of physical testing course. 50 human soldiers stood in formation waiting. They wore combat uniforms and carried heavy packs on their backs. Each pack probably weighed 20 or 30 kilograms. Linda explained this was a standard training course. Human soldiers ran it regularly to maintain their physical fitness. She said it was 5 kilometers long with various obstacles. The soldiers would complete it in full combat gear while carrying equipment. She gave a signal and the soldiers started running. They moved fast, their boots hitting the ground in rhythm. They ran along the path, their bodies moving smoothly despite the heavy packs. When they reached the first obstacle, a tall wall, they climbed over it without slowing down much. Some soldiers helped others over the top. Then they kept running. Zethrak watched in horror. The humans were doing in Earth's gravity what would be impossible for Viridians even in their home gravity. They climbed walls. They crawled under barriers. They swung from ropes. They carried each other when the exercise required it. And they did it all while running, while breathing hard but never stopping. The Viridian warriors stood on the side of the field and watched. Several of them had to sit down. The stress of just standing and watching was too much. Kirath actually began crying. For a Viridian, crying meant small fragments of crystal breaking off from the eye structures. It was extremely painful and a sign of complete breakdown. The human soldiers finished the 5 kilometers and lined up again. They were breathing hard and sweating, but they were all standing. All 50 had completed the course. Linda asked if the Viridians would like to see it again. This time the soldiers would add more weight to their packs. Zethrak wanted to say no. He wanted to return to the shuttle immediately, but he forced himself to stay and watch. The soldiers added more equipment to their packs. The packs now probably weighed 40 or 50 kilograms each. Then they ran the course again. Faster than the first time. It was impossible. It defied everything Zethrak understood about physical limitations. These humans were carrying half their body weight in equipment and running through obstacles in 3 times normal gravity. They were smiling and joking with each other as they ran. Some of them were actually racing to see who could finish first. When the demonstration ended, Linda turned to Zethrak. Her face was serious now. She said human soldiers trained in Earth's gravity every day. When they deployed to lower gravity environments, they became even stronger and faster. On a planet with 1/3 Earth's gravity, like the Viridian homeworld, human soldiers would be able to jump incredible heights. They could carry massive amounts of equipment. They could fight for hours without tiring. Steve Patterson joined them. He said the humans understood the Viridians had superior technology. Their ships were faster. Their weapons were more advanced. But technology was not everything. Wars were won by soldiers on the ground holding territory, and no Viridian soldier could hold Earth. Ever. He continued speaking. He said if the Viridian Empire tried to invade Earth, they would fail. Their soldiers would die from gravity exposure before humans ever fired a shot. But he also said something else. If the Viridians forced a war, humanity would eventually develop better ships and better weapons. And then human soldiers would land on Viridian worlds where gravity made humans into super soldiers. The Empire could not win that fight either. Zethrak understood the message clearly. Earth could not be taken, and if war started, eventually the Empire itself would fall to human troops. It was a stalemate where both sides had overwhelming advantage in different environments. Linda said humanity did not want war. They just wanted to be left alone. But if the Empire insisted on conquest, Earth would teach the rest of the galaxy how to resist. They would share their technology, train other species, help them fight back. The Empire would face rebellions on every world. She paused, then offered an alternative. Peace. Real peace, not the fake peace of surrender. The Empire and humanity could negotiate as equals. They could trade technology and knowledge. They could both benefit from cooperation instead of conflict. Zethrak felt his pride resisting. The Viridian Empire did not negotiate as equals. They conquered or they withdrew. There was no middle ground. But his pride was being crushed by Earth's gravity just like his body was. He realized that pride was a luxury he could not afford anymore. He said he would send a message to the High Council. He would tell them everything he had seen and experienced. He would recommend they pursue peaceful relations with humanity. He could not promise the council would agree, but he would try. Steve Patterson leaned back in his chair and looked at the Viridian commander with calm eyes. He asked Zethrak to explain exactly what the Viridian Empire wanted from humanity. What would happen if humans agreed to join the Empire? What would be expected of them? Zethrak struggled to concentrate on the questions. His vision was becoming blurry. The gravity was affecting his optical sensors. The human sitting across from him looked fuzzy around the edges. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, but it did not help much. He said the Empire would offer protection and prosperity. The Viridians had advanced technology that could help humanity grow faster. They had knowledge about space travel, about energy production, about medicine. In return, humanity would become part of the Empire. They would provide resources and labor when needed. They would follow imperial law. They would be loyal. Steve nodded slowly like he was considering the offer. Then he asked the question everyone knew he would ask. What if humanity said no? What if they refused to join? Zethrak wanted to answer with strength. He wanted to say the Empire would crush any resistance. That was what he would normally say. That was what had worked on 47 other worlds. But sitting here in this crushing gravity, the words felt hollow. He said that would be unfortunate. War would benefit no one. Linda Hayes laughed. It was not a mean laugh exactly, but it was not friendly either. She said the commander was being diplomatic. She appreciated that. But everyone in the room knew the truth. The Viridian Empire conquered species that refused to join peacefully. That was what empires did. Zethrak could not argue with that. It was true. Then the female scientist spoke for the first time. Her name was Dr. Amy Foster. She looked at Zethrak with curious eyes like he was an interesting specimen in her laboratory. She asked how the commander was finding Earth's environment. Was the gravity comfortable? Was the air acceptable? Was everything meeting his needs? It was a trap of a question. Everyone at the table knew it. The Viridians were clearly struggling. Amy wanted Zethrak to admit it out loud, to say the words that would change everything about this negotiation. Zethrak considered lying. He could say everything was fine, that Viridians were strong and adaptable, but what would be the point? The humans could see his warriors suffering. Morinth was barely holding herself together. 3 other warriors were showing serious structural damage. Lying would just make him look foolish. He said the gravity was manageable. It was not comfortable, but it was manageable. Linda Hayes smiled. Then she did something that shocked every Viridian in the room. She stood up from her chair in one smooth motion. She dropped to the floor, and she started doing push-ups. Her body went down and up, over and over again. She did 20 of them. Each one was fast and controlled. Her breathing did not even change. When she finished, she stood back up like nothing had happened. For a Viridian, what Linda just did would be impossible. Even in their home gravity, doing 20 push-ups was a difficult exercise. Here on Earth, with 3 times the normal gravity, it would kill them. Their bodies would shatter under the strain. But Linda had done it easily. Like it was nothing. She sat back down in her chair and looked at Zethrak. She said Earth's gravity seemed pretty manageable to humans, because they grew up in it, because their bodies were built for it. Their bones were dense and strong. Their muscles were powerful. Their entire physiology was adapted to survive in this crushing environment. Steve Patterson leaned forward on the table. His friendly smile was gone now. His face was serious. He said they should stop pretending and talk honestly. The Viridians had come to Earth expecting to intimidate primitives. They thought they would land, make demands, and humanity would surrender out of fear. But now the Viridians were discovering something unexpected. They could not even walk comfortably on Earth's surface. He asked the question directly. How did the Viridian Empire plan to conquer a planet where the gravity itself was a weapon against them? Silence filled the room. Zethrak had no answer. The truth was settling on him as heavily as Earth's gravity. They had made a terrible mistake. The Empire had never encountered a high-gravity species before. Every world they had conquered had low or moderate gravity. They had never imagined a species that evolved in such a harsh environment. Colonel Jake Murphy spoke for the first time. He was the older military officer with the gray hair. His voice was deep and firm. He said Earth had been monitoring the Viridian delegation since they landed. They had medical sensors pointed at the shuttle. They could see the stress fractures forming in Viridian bodies. They could measure the physical damage the gravity was causing. Jake said at the current rate of deterioration, the Viridians would need to leave within 48 hours or risk permanent injury. Some of the warriors were already at critical levels. They might not survive another day. Mirlin, who had been silent until now, spoke through the communication system. Her voice came from a device on Zethrak's armor. She said the humans were correct. 7 warriors were showing critical structural stress. 4 more, including the commander, were approaching dangerous levels. They could not stay on Earth much longer. Amy Foster nodded like this confirmed her scientific predictions. She said the human body was built to withstand incredible forces. Bones that could support 3 times their weight. Muscles that could lift heavy objects all day long. A cardiovascular system that could pump blood against strong gravity. Humans were not the smartest species in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced. But in terms of pure physical durability, they were exceptional. Linda stood up again. She said the meeting would continue tomorrow. She had arranged quarters for the Viridians on the base where they could rest. The humans would provide any medical assistance needed. It was not a suggestion. It was a dismissal. The humans were sending them away because they knew the Viridians were failing. Getting back to the shuttle was worse than the walk to the conference building. Zethrak's body was shutting down. His legs barely supported his weight. Each step sent cracks spreading through his crystalline structure. 2 warriors had to be carried by their companions. They could no longer walk at all. The human guards watched them struggle across the landing pad. The guards looked young and fit. They stood at attention without any effort. Some of them were even smiling. Not mean smiles, but smiles of people who knew they had already won. Back inside the shuttle, the artificial gravity system kicked in. It adjusted to Viridian standard, reducing the pull to 1/3 of Earth's gravity. Zethrak collapsed in his seat. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. His body began to heal almost instantly. The cracks stopped spreading. His vision cleared. He could breathe again. Around him, his warriors were experiencing the same relief. But the damage had been done. Morinth needed to go into medical stasis. Her internal structure was too damaged to heal on its own. 3 other warriors were in similar condition. The rest were traumatized by the experience. Mirlin stood beside Zethrak's chair. She did not say anything at first. She just looked at him with her crystalline eyes. Finally, she spoke quietly. She said they were defeated. They could not fight on this world. They could barely stand. If the humans decided to attack the shuttle right now, the Viridians would be helpless. They could not escape, and they could not defend themselves. Zethrak knew she was right. He looked out the shuttle window at the human base. Lights were coming on as the sun set. Vehicles moved around. Soldiers walked between buildings. Everything looked normal and peaceful. The humans were not preparing for battle. They did not need to. Earth itself was their fortress. He thought about the Empire's invasion plan, the plan that had worked on 47 other worlds. Land troops on the surface, establish control of major cities, show superior force until the population surrendered. It was a simple plan that had never failed. It would fail on Earth. Viridian troops would land and immediately begin dying from the gravity. They would be helpless against human soldiers who could move and fight normally. It would not be a battle. It would be a massacre. Zethrak made a decision. He told Mirlin to prepare a report for the High Council. A complete and honest report about what happened here, about how Earth's gravity made invasion impossible, about how humans were physically superior in ways the Empire had never considered. Mirlin asked what he would recommend. Should the Empire send the full invasion fleet? Should they bombard Earth from orbit? Should they retreat and leave this system alone? Zethrak was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said he would recommend negotiation, not the negotiation they had planned, where Viridians dictated terms and humans accepted. Real negotiation between equals, because that was what they were, equals. The Empire could destroy human ships in space, but humans could defend their planet forever. Neither side could truly win. Commander Zethrak read the human message with interest. They wanted to negotiate on their home planet. They said their leaders were there and could not come to space. It made sense. The humans were a primitive species. Most of their population still lived on one planet. They had not spread out across many worlds like the Viridians had done. Mirlin did not trust the message. She said it could be a trap. Maybe the humans had weapons on their planet that they did not have in space. Maybe they wanted to lure the Viridians down to the surface and attack them there. It would be smart even for a primitive species. Zethrak considered her words carefully. He was a good commander because he thought about all possibilities. But when he looked at the data about Earth, he saw nothing dangerous. The planet had no orbital weapons platforms. Their military bases were scattered and poorly defended. They had missiles, but those missiles used chemical fuel and were very slow. Viridian shields could stop them easily. He told Mirlin they would go to Earth, but they would bring 20 warriors in full battle armor. They would bring weapons and shields. They would scan everything before they landed. If it was a trap, they would destroy the meeting site and return to the fleet. The humans would pay for their trick with the destruction of their entire station. Mirlin agreed, but she still looked worried. She had a bad feeling about this meeting. Something felt wrong, but she could not explain what it was. Zethrak told her not to worry. What could these primitive humans possibly do to harm the mighty Viridian Empire? 3 days later, the Viridian shuttle flew down through Earth's atmosphere. Zethrak sat in the command seat and watched the planet grow larger on the screen. It was a beautiful world. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds swirled in patterns. Green and brown land masses broke through the blue. It looked peaceful and harmless. The shuttle headed for a place called Edwards Air Force Base in North America. It was a military installation in a desert area, flat and empty for kilometers in every direction. A good place for a meeting, hard for humans to hide an ambush in such an open space. As the shuttle entered the lower atmosphere, Zethrak began to feel strange. His body felt heavier somehow. At first he thought it was just nervousness. He had been in many battles, but this was different. This was a meeting with an unknown species on their homeworld. But the feeling got worse as they descended. By the time the shuttle landed on the concrete pad, Zethrak felt like someone had placed weights on his shoulders. He stood up from his seat and his legs shook slightly. What was happening? He looked at his warriors. Several of them looked uncomfortable too. Morinth, one of his best soldiers, was breathing hard. Her crystal body was showing tiny cracks. Zethrak realized what was wrong. The gravity. They had read the measurements. They knew Earth had stronger gravity than their homeworld, but reading numbers on a screen was different from feeling it in your body. Earth's gravity pulled at them with 3 times the force they were used to. Every part of his crystalline structure was under stress. He could not show weakness, not now, not in front of the humans. He ordered his warriors to form up. They would march out together and meet the humans with dignity and strength. Even if every step hurt, they would not let these primitives see them struggle. The shuttle door opened. Zethrak stepped out onto the surface of Earth. The sun was bright and hot. The air smelled strange, full of dust and something else he could not identify, and the gravity pulled at him like invisible hands trying to drag him down to the ground. He took a step forward and his leg buckled. Just a little bit, barely noticeable. He caught himself with a hand on the shuttle's hull, trying to make it look casual, like he meant to touch the shuttle. But inside he was alarmed. One step and he had almost fallen. Behind him, his warriors emerged from the shuttle. They formed 2 lines as they had been trained to do. But the lines were not straight. The warriors swayed like trees in wind. Kirath, one of the youngest, actually stumbled and had to catch himself on another warrior's shoulder. Zethrak looked across the landing pad. 3 humans were walking toward them. 2 wore military uniforms. One was female with short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. The other was male, older, with gray hair and many medals on his uniform. The third human was female, younger, wearing simple clothes and carrying a computer tablet. What struck Zethrak most was how easily they moved. They walked across the surface of this crushing world like it was nothing. Their steps were smooth and confident. They did not struggle or stumble. This was their home. They were adapted to this terrible gravity. The female soldier stopped a few meters away. She smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. She said her name was Captain Linda Hayes. She welcomed Zethrak to Earth on behalf of the United Earth government. Zethrak tried to bow his head in greeting. The movement sent pain through his neck structure. He managed to say his name and that he appreciated their willingness to negotiate. His voice came out strained. He hoped the humans did not notice. Linda said they should go to the conference center to talk. It was only a short walk. She pointed to a building in the distance. Zethrak looked at the building. It was perhaps 200 meters away, under normal circumstances an easy walk, but now, in this crushing gravity, those 200 meters looked like a mountain to climb. He had no choice. He nodded and began to walk. His warriors followed behind him. Each step was a battle against the planet itself. Earth pulled at him constantly, never stopping, never giving him a moment to rest. His crystalline structure groaned under the pressure. He could feel small cracks beginning to form deep inside his body. Morinth was in bad shape. She was breathing hard, her chest plates rising and falling rapidly. Crystalline beings did not need to breathe the same way as organic species, but stress made their bodies pull in more energy from the air. She was stressed beyond anything she had experienced in battle. Halfway to the building, Kirath fell to one knee. The young warrior caught himself quickly and stood back up, but the humans had seen it. Linda slowed down slightly. She pointed to things around the base, talking about the history of the place. But Zethrak knew what she was really doing. She was giving them time to recover. She was showing mercy, or she was showing superiority. They finally reached the conference building. Zethrak felt exhausted, like he had just fought a major battle. But all he had done was walk 200 meters. His warriors looked terrible. Half of them were showing visible cracks in their crystal structures. All of them were moving slowly and carefully. The humans looked perfectly fine, not tired at all. They opened the door and led the Viridians inside. The building was cool and dark after the bright desert sun. Zethrak appreciated the shade. Every little comfort mattered now. Linda led them to a conference room. There was a long table with chairs around it, human-sized chairs built for human bodies. Zethrak carefully lowered himself into a chair, his body compressed under his own weight. He could hear his internal structure cracking. Not badly, not yet, but enough to worry him. Around the table, his warriors sat down with relief. Some could not hide their discomfort. They shifted constantly, trying to find a position that hurt less. The human sat across from them, looking relaxed and comfortable. Another human entered the room. This one was male, middle-aged, with gray streaks in his brown hair. He wore an expensive suit and had the smooth confidence of a politician. He introduced himself as Steve Patterson, a representative of the civilian government. Steve smiled and said they should begin talking about what the Viridian Empire wanted from humanity. His voice was friendly, like they were discussing a business deal, not the potential conquest of an entire species. Zethrak tried to focus on the negotiation. This was what he came here to do. But his mind was distracted by pain and the growing realization that something had gone terribly wrong. The humans were not afraid. They were not desperate. They sat in their chairs looking calm and in control. And Zethrak, commander of the mighty Viridian fleet, could barely sit up straight in his chair. The Viridian Empire had been traveling through space for thousands of years. They had found many different alien races and conquered them all. Their ships were the fastest in the galaxy. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in seconds. Their soldiers were trained to fight and win against anyone. When they found the humans living on a small station near Saturn, they thought it would be another easy victory. Commander Zethrak stood in his ship and looked at the screens showing the human colony. He was tall and made of something that looked like living crystal. Light passed through his body and made rainbow colors on the walls. His officer Mirlin stood beside him. She was also made of crystal, but smaller and with a voice that sounded like music. Mirlin looked at her computer and said the humans were a young species. They had just learned how to travel between planets. Their technology was very basic. They only had simple weapons and slow ships. The station near Saturn had about 8,000 people living there. Most were families and workers. Only a few were soldiers. Zethrak nodded his head slowly. He had seen this many times before. A new species living in space thinking they were safe. Then the Viridian Empire would arrive and give them a choice: join the Empire or be destroyed. Every species had chosen to join. Some took longer to decide, but they all joined in the end. He told Mirlin to send the message. The humans would have one day to decide: surrender and become part of the Empire, or watch their station get torn apart by Viridian weapons. It was not a difficult choice. At least Zethrak did not think it was difficult. The message went out across space to the human station. Zethrak expected the humans to panic. He expected them to call for help, to cry, to beg for more time. That is what most species did when they first saw the Viridian fleet. On Titan Station, Lieutenant Greg Morris sat in the command room and read the alien message 3 times. He was only 30 years old and had sandy-colored hair. His jaw was tight as he read the words. Surrender or die. He had one day to decide the fate of 8,000 people. Claire Bennett stood next to him. She was the chief engineer on the station. Her hands were always dirty from working on machines. She was short and strong and never scared of anything. But today, Greg could see worry in her eyes. Next to Claire was Dr. Paul Carter. He was older with gray hair and had been studying space for 40 years. He knew more about alien life than anyone else on the station. He looked at the alien ships on the screen and shook his head. Paul said they could not fight. The alien ships were too advanced. Their weapons were too powerful. The station had no real defenses. They were scientists and families, not soldiers. He said they should evacuate everyone and run back to Earth. Maybe Earth could fight the aliens. Maybe Earth would have a chance. Greg stood up and walked around the small room. His mind was working fast. He thought about fighting, but Paul was right. They would lose in seconds. He thought about running, but the alien ships were faster. They would be caught before they reached Earth. He thought about surrendering, but something inside him refused to give up. Then he looked at the computer screen showing information about Saturn, the giant planet with its beautiful rings, the moons orbiting around it. And there, buried in the data, was something interesting. Information about gravity. Greg asked a question. He wanted to know about the alien home planet. What was it like? What was the gravity there? Paul looked confused, but he checked his computer. He read the information the aliens had sent with their message. Every species sent basic information about themselves when they made first contact. It was a way to show they were willing to talk. The Viridians had sent information too. Paul's eyes went wide as he read. He said the Viridian home planet had very low gravity, only about 1/3 of Earth's gravity. That meant everything weighed much less there. A person who weighed 90 kilograms on Earth would only weigh 30 kilograms on the Viridian planet. Greg felt something click in his mind. An idea started to form. It was crazy and might not work, but it was better than nothing. He asked Claire about Earth's gravity compared to Titan's gravity. Claire said Titan only had 14% of Earth's gravity. That was why everyone on the station felt so light. They could jump higher and carry heavy things easily. Earth's gravity was much stronger. Greg smiled for the first time since the aliens arrived. He had an idea. It was dangerous and required perfect timing, but it might save everyone. He told Claire and Paul his plan. He would send a message to the aliens. He would tell them the humans wanted to negotiate. But the human government was on Earth, not on this small station. If the aliens wanted to talk about surrender, they needed to come to Earth. The leaders were there. The decision-makers were there. It only made sense to meet on Earth. Paul said the aliens would never agree. They would see it as a trick. But Greg said no. The aliens were arrogant. They had conquered 47 different star systems. They thought humans were just another weak species. They would come to Earth because they believed they were superior. They would come because they thought humans could never threaten them. Claire asked what would happen when the aliens arrived on Earth. Greg's smile got bigger. He said Earth's gravity would happen. The aliens had evolved in low gravity. Their bodies were made for a light world. Earth's gravity was 3 times stronger than their home planet. It would be like humans trying to live on a planet with 3 times Earth's gravity. Every step would be difficult. Every movement would hurt. Their own weight would crush them. Paul understood now. He said it was brilliant. Use the planet itself as a weapon. The aliens could not fight if they could not even stand up. But he asked how they would get Earth to agree. This was a small station. They did not have authority to speak for the whole planet. Greg said they would send the message anyway. By the time Earth found out, the aliens would already be on their way. Earth would have no choice but to play along. And if the plan worked, humanity would not need to fire a single shot. Gravity would do all the work. Claire started laughing. She said it was the craziest plan she had ever heard, but it was also the only plan they had. She said she would help. Paul agreed too. They would bet everything on Earth's gravity being too strong for the crystal aliens. Greg sat down and started writing the message. He made it sound respectful and scared. He said humans wanted peace. He said they understood the Empire was powerful. He said human leaders on Earth wanted to discuss terms of surrender. Please come to Earth. Please meet with the government. We are ready to talk. He sent the message and waited. The 3 humans sat in the command room, hoping the aliens would take the bait.